Close your eyes for a moment. Not yet, obviously. You still need to read this. But soon, for now, just imagine. Imagine a world with no cities, no streets, no courts, no judges wearing funny hats, just people. Small groups of people, wandering, eating, arguing, mostly arguing. This was early human life. And before laws existed, life was, in a very specific way, surprisingly simple, and also completely unfair. If someone took your food, there was no system to protect you, no judge, no court, no concept of this is wrong. There was only one question: can you take it back? If the answer was no, then it was never really yours. In early human communities, justice was not a system. It was a competition, and the winner was usually the strongest person in the room, which, as you can imagine, was not a great system. Arguments didn't need evidence. They didn't need witnesses. They didn't even need logic. I saw you take it. No, you didn't. I feel like I did. Then fight me. And that was the legal system. Here is something interesting about humans. We didn't write things down. Not at first. We remembered. Or at least, we believed we did. Memory was everything. Every agreement. Every trade. Every promise. All of it lived somewhere inside the human brain, which, if you've ever forgotten where you put your keys, should give you some idea of how well that worked. Two people could live the same moment, experience the same event, stand in the same place at the same time, and walk away with completely different truths. I gave you 3. No, you gave me 2. I remember clearly. So do I. And just like that, reality became negotiable. In small groups, this was frustrating. In larger groups, it became dangerous. Because disagreements didn't end. They grew. Voices became louder. Movements became sharper. And eventually, someone got hurt. Or worse, someone didn't get the chance to argue anymore. Over time, people began to notice something. Slowly. Quietly. The way you notice a leak in a roof. Not all at once, but one drip at a time. The strongest person was not always the fairest. The loudest person was not always right. And the most aggressive person was usually the problem. But without rules, there was no way to prove it. There was no shared system, no neutral ground, no place to stand and say, this is wrong. Only opinions and consequences, the unwritten rules. So humans tried something new. They created expectations, unwritten ones, simple ideas everyone was supposed to follow. Don't take what isn't yours. Don't hurt your neighbor. Don't lie. Simple, clear, reasonable. At least, in theory, because the moment someone broke a rule, everything fell apart again. Why did you do that? I had to. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. And just like that, they were back at the beginning. Rules existed, but only when people agreed, and people did not always agree. Communities tried things. Leaders stepped forward. Elders were given respect. Stronger voices tried to guide the weaker ones. They listened. They judged. They decided. And for a while, it almost worked. Almost. Because they had a problem. They were human, which meant they remembered things their own way. They had opinions. They had preferences. They had friends. And sometimes they had favorites, which made things complicated. Because once people started noticing bias, trust began to fade. Oh, now you remember it like that? How convenient. This doesn't feel fair, and fairness was a new idea. Before, people didn't expect fairness. They expected power. They expected strength. But now, they wanted something different. And wanting something that doesn't exist yet is where change begins. Communities grew larger, more people, more interactions, more problems, more arguments. The old system was no longer enough. You couldn't rely on memory. You couldn't rely on strength. You couldn't rely on opinions. Something had to change, and eventually, it did. In a place called Mesopotamia, between 2 rivers and growing cities, a different kind of idea began to stir. Imagine the scene, if you can. Dusty roads, Low flat buildings made of sun-dried clay, the smell of bread and animals, people moving in slow crowds, a civilization just barely learning to be a civilization. Markets existed, trades happened, agreements were made, and broken, and argued about for a very long time. And then came a man, a king, actually. His name was Hammurabi. He ruled over Babylon, which was, at the time, one of the most impressive cities in the known world, which admittedly wasn't saying a huge amount, but still. Hammurabi looked at his kingdom. He looked at the markets, the merchants, the neighbors arguing over fences, the farmers arguing over water, the people arguing about everything, and he noticed something: chaos, quiet, constant, exhausting chaos. Not the dramatic kind, not fire and battles, the slow kind, the kind that wears people down, the kind that makes people say, "This isn't fair," every single day. And Hammurabi decided to do something about it. He made a decision. Rules should not live in memory. They should not depend on opinion. They should not change based on who's speaking. They should be fixed, clear, visible. So he did something radical. He wrote them down, not on something temporary, not on something fragile, but on stone. Large stone, heavy stone, stone that would not move, stone that would not forget, stone that would not, under any circumstances, remember things differently in the morning. The stele of Hammurabi, nearly 8 feet tall, black basalt, smooth, imposing. And on it, inscribed carefully, 282 laws. 282. Someone was very thorough, because early laws were not gentle. They were not designed to be kind. They were designed to be clear. And clarity often came with severity. An eye for an eye. Phrase that sounds almost poetic, balanced, mathematical even, almost fair. Until you think about it, because it meant exactly what it said. No interpretation, no debate, no lengthy court proceedings. You hurt someone in a very specific way, and the law told you exactly what happened next, which, in a world full of endless arguments, was strangely comforting. For the first time, people knew what would happen. Actions had defined consequences, predictable ones, stable ones, and that stability created something new: order. The laws were clear, direct, unavoidable. If you steal, punishment. If you lie, punishment. If you harm, punishment. Simple, consistent, unarguable. For the first time, people didn't have to guess. They didn't have to remember. They didn't have to negotiate reality. They could see it, right there, in front of them. On a very large rock, some of the laws were practical. If someone borrowed an ox and it died, there were rules for that. If a merchant cheated on a deal, there were rules for that. If a wife was mistreated, there were rules for that too. And some of the laws were very specific, uncomfortably specific. If a builder constructs a house and it collapses, there would be consequences, serious ones, which, as you can imagine, made construction a very stressful profession. Mistakes were not small. They were not ignored. They were not discussed endlessly. They were resolved, quickly, decisively, sometimes harshly. Not perfect order, not peaceful order, but enough. Enough to reduce chaos, enough to reduce conflict, enough to let people breathe just a little easier. Imagine what that felt like. To wake up in the morning, go to the market, trade something, and know that if someone cheated you, there was a place to go, a system, a structure, a shared agreement, something that didn't belong to any single person, something bigger, something written on a very large rock in the middle of the city where everyone could see it, because that was the other thing about Hammurabi's laws. They were public. Anyone could walk past the stele. Anyone could look. You didn't need to be a king to know the rules. You just needed eyes. And maybe someone who could read. But still, the principle was there. Transparency. For the very first time. Now, it would be easy to look at these laws and find the flaws. And there were flaws. The punishments were harsh. The system was not equal for everyone. Slaves had fewer rights. Women had fewer protections. It was not modern. It was not progressive. It was not what we would call fair today. But here's the thing. It was better than before. And sometimes, better than before is the most important step there is. Because before laws, the strongest person was right. And now, for the first time in history, being right was no longer about volume. It was about something written, something fixed, something that didn't argue back. Hammurabi's Code did not last forever. Babylon rose and fell. Empires shifted. Languages changed. But the idea survived. That laws should be written. That rules should be visible. That justice should not depend on who is in the room. That idea moved forward into Egypt, into Greece, into Rome. Rome, which would one day create the most detailed legal system for the ancient world had ever seen. Systems of courts, systems of rights, systems of appeals. Ideas so strong that we still use them today. Innocent until proven guilty. That's Roman. The right to face your accuser. That's Roman too. Small ideas, enormous consequences. Like a stone dropped in still water. The ripple goes further than anyone expects. Centuries passed. Rome crumbled. The roads grew quiet. The libraries went dark. And for a long, slow stretch of history, laws became complicated again. Not quite as chaotic as before, but confused. Different kings, different rules, different punishments for the same crime, depending on where you stood. Which village, which lord, which mood the Lord was in that morning. Justice had become local again, personal again, and unfair again, until a different kind of document appeared. In the year 1215, in a meadow called Runnymede, on the banks of the River Thames, a group of barons, and one very reluctant king, did something remarkable. They agreed. On paper, the king agreed that even the king, was not above the law. This was new, shockingly new. For thousands of years, kings had ruled because they were kings, because God said so, because the army said so, because who was going to stop them? But now, there was a document, a piece of parchment, with a seal, and on it, a simple idea. No one is above the law, not even a king. The document was called the Magna Carta, which sounds very impressive. It means, in Latin, Great Charter, which sounds even more impressive. And it was. The Magna Carta didn't fix everything. It was messy. It was quickly ignored by the king who signed it. It had to be reissued several times. But the idea inside it, the idea that power has limits, that idea never went away. Centuries continued their slow turning. Philosophers argued about what fairness meant. Enlightenment thinkers said things like, people have rights, not because kings give them, not because they were earned, just because they are human. This was a very unusual idea. Most people at the time did not believe it. Most people at the time had never believed it. But slowly, uncomfortably slowly, it spread. Revolutions happened. Documents were written. Constitutions appeared. Declarations were declared. Rights were listed. The idea that power should come from people, not just from the person holding the sword, became something more than an idea. It became a demand. And eventually, for many places in the world, it became the system. Here is something worth remembering. The next time you are frustrated by a rule, by paperwork, by bureaucracy, by a form that asks for information that makes absolutely no sense, all of that is the result of people trying to fix something, not perfectly. Never perfectly, but trying. Every law has a story. Every rule was written because something went wrong. Every regulation exists because at some point, someone was not protected. And someone else said, that shouldn't happen again. And they wrote it down on clay or parchment or stone or paper or a digital document no one will ever fully read. But they wrote it, and that act of writing, that small, ordinary, human act, is one of the most powerful things we have ever done. It is older than democracy, older than philosophy, older than most of the ideas we take for granted. And it started because two people in a dusty marketplace couldn't agree on how many fish one of them owed the other, which is, when you think about it, a very human beginning for a very human story. And now, you know it? So, you can close your eyes. For real this time. The laws will still be there in the morning, written in stone, waiting, patient, as they always have been. Good night,